Do you go out with friends?
Well, a boy's best friend is his mother.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Voices from the Mausoleum. I'm solo again for an episode, which doesn't happen much these days, and it's kind of excited. This topic came up not that long ago, and I thought it would be fun to do a little bit of a shorter video of just me talking about my top 5 picks for horror mamas. This badass shirt design is from the fabulous Lady Crisis. I will link her information in the description below. She came on not that long ago to do a zombie makeup look with me in May. She's a phenomenal content creator, such a sweet human being, and this is like my favorite t-shirt design that she has. I love it so much. It's got lime green. Horror mama, love it. So it seemed appropriate for this video and may have been part of the influence. Just gonna adjust this. Okay. So be curious to see how many of these you guys were able to guess I was going to use. So we're going to go from my number 5 down to my number 1 favorite horror mama. And my number 1 is Lynn Peltzer from Gremlins. Every time I watch Gremlins, no matter how many times I've seen it before, I am so into Lynn's character. This like phenomenal mom, loves her kids, supports her husband literally unconditionally, so much so that her house gets destroyed because of his inventions and she's trying to be supportive. But one of my favorite things about her that made her kind of bumped up and go to this list to begin with is because of her reaction to the Gremlins. She comes in and she's like this whole situation of like, I have no idea what's going on. This is my kitchen. And she just goes ham on these Gremlins. The microwave is like one of my favorite scenes. Putting them in look, this is like one of my favorite scenes in Gremlins is the part where Lynn comes down and they are destroying her house. And she's like, none of that. And I think that those are all really good reasons. I will say this for this list, I specifically went with good moms, not, horrible mothers, meaning there will be no mention of Carrie because we're not talking about garbage moms. We're talking about good moms, right? So anyway, so my number 5 is Lynn Peltzer from Gremlins. I love her character so much. She is so devoted to her family, and the way that she comes out in this weird situation with these little monsters in her house, and she's just like, not today. Like, I love that so much. It is definitely my favorite sequence in the original Gremlins movie. So she's my number 5. My number 4, this one you probably guessed was on the list. My number 4 is going to be Pamela Voorhees from Friday the 13th, the first one. This is probably a super obvious one. But I actually am not like a massive fan of the Friday the 13th franchise. I love the first film. I think it was really good. I like the concept leading into, the story of this mother who wasn't there to protect her son, exacting revenge, yada, yada. But I think when they started going in the other direction of this like supernatural element of Jason coming back as this like full grown ass man and doing all of this, I kind of lost interest in the franchise. I do think I've seen all of them though. But I'm just not like a huge fan, but she had to be on this list. Because I feel like, I mean, obviously going after people who weren't a part of it is not really like the greatest thing, right? Because they weren't responsible. But I have a son, and I can tell you right now, that if somebody else were to be responsible for something bad happening to them, I'm gonna leave it at that. In case anybody sees this video and something has happened. So she's on my list strictly because of that, because she loved her son, and they kind of had a bit of a weird relationship. I'm not arguing that. That's a different show. But she was very much you know what, like, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna show these teenagers what's what. And y'all are the reason. People like you are the reason that my son is dead. And yeah, and she's iconic, right? I mean, Mrs. Voorhees is super iconic, so she had to be on the list somewhere, right? Okay, so my number 3 is probably not one anybody could have guessed, and it's technically 2 people, but hear me out. I'm a really big fan of the movie Mama. I know plenty of people who were not big fans of this, who did not like this film, mostly because of the ending, I believe, is a lot of people's like gripe. But I love this film. I've seen it quite a few times. Um, it's just a really, I just really enjoyed this movie a lot. Um, and the 2 characters from this film that make my horror mama list is going to be Annabelle, which is played by Jessica Chastain. She did a great job. And then the other character is the mama ghost character. I wrote her real name down because I can never remember it. Her real name is Jean Podolsky, which you don't learn until, much later in the film. These 2 women represent very interesting things when it comes to choice and motherhood. If you're not familiar with the story, it is about these 2 little girls who get, I'm just going to say abandoned. You need to watch the film. Abandoned in this cabin, and they're looked after by this mother spirit, this ghost. And that's the only reason that they survive. And when their uncle finds them a couple years after the fact, and takes them in, the spirit follows them. And the uncle has this girlfriend who's very kind of juvenile, not really interested in kids or being an adult. And there's some kind of tropes around that. But so what we learn, this is a spoiler alert. So I will put chapters. If you have not seen Mama and you're interested in seeing it, I'm about to ruin the ending. So skip ahead to the next chapter. But first, I'll talk about Annabelle. Annabelle has no interest in being a mother. She is not excited at all about supporting her boyfriend in this adventure of essentially becoming a father for his nieces. And it turns into the story where she doesn't feel that way in the end. And she gets to have this really great relationship with these kids. And she is pushed into this situation that's not natural for her. And it's just a very interesting piece on motherhood and the concept of choice. This is the spoiler part. Skip to the next chapter if you're going to watch this and you don't want the movie ruined. At the end of Mama, we learn that our Mama character, Jean Podolsky, was a sick woman who lived in an asylum, who was raped by the doctors there, became pregnant, had a baby, and they took the baby away from her. And she loses it, absolutely snaps, breaks free, takes the baby, and jumps off a cliff when she's cornered. She doesn't have anywhere to go. And at the bottom of the cliff is a cabin that she haunts, where we meet the little girls later on in the movie, and that's how that all ties together. But she also represents a very interesting point about motherhood and choice, and she wasn't given one. Either situation. She wasn't given the choice to get pregnant. She wasn't given the choice to keep the baby that she helped, grow inside of her body and give birth to. And I think that aside from going on, I won't go on that. I won't go down that rabbit hole for this one, but I love the 2 dynamics of these 2 different mothers and this concept that this ghostly mother found what she was missing in the little girls that she saved and kept safe for several years. And I think that it's just these 2 different perspectives of motherhood that are so powerful to me that they absolutely had to be on this list. I absolutely love the film Mama. I highly recommend watching it, if you haven't seen it. My number 2, Horror Mama. This one, if you know me, you knew was going to be on the list. I'm a huge Silent Hill fan. The games, I loved the first movie. I like Silent Hill. I genuinely do. I was just as devastated by all the other gamers when Silent Hills got canceled. I still get like emotionally upset about the fact, like after we see the PT teaser trailer. If you don't know what that is, it's a playable teaser that PlayStation released. It's supposed to be related into the Silent Hill game that was coming out. It's fucking terrifying, but so good, beautifully done, terrifying. Love Silent Hill, love the lore, all of that jazz, right? So when they did the Silent Hill movie, it's obviously different from the video game. I don't have problems with that. It's called an adaptation, right? Not a remake. or a, like a translation of into a film. It's an adaptation. And Rose De Silva is my number 2 because she is a badass mom. This woman faces off against all the big bads, right? She faces off Pyramid Head. She goes against the nurses. Like, she's like, I will do anything to save my child. And there's no, like, there really isn't, even my number 1, I'm going to be honest, there really isn't a better example of a phenomenal horror mama than Rose De Silva in Silent Hill. The lengths this woman is willing to go to protect her child, regardless of what her husband thinks. And you know what's crazy is when you have these kids who experience these things. So if you don't know the story, she takes her adopted daughter to Silent Hill to try to figure out why she keeps having these nightmares and saying Silent Hill. She's sleepwalking, ending up in these really dangerous situations, and she wants to figure out what's going on. So she takes her. Sharon is the daughter's name. I totally spaced it for a second. Swear to God, I'm a fan. Anyway, so what's interesting to me is that a lot of times these children in these stories, when they have these weird, crazy things that happen to them, the parents always make it worse. You've seen The Exorcist. Let's shock them. Put them in an asylum, starve them, lock them away. Let's do all these things that amplify and make all of these situations worse. But she doesn't do that. She doesn't wait around for doctors to help. She takes her daughter and goes straight to the source and is willing to do whatever it takes to help her. And so then when our story moves forward and Sharon is gone and she has to go through the town and all these monstrosities that exist, she doesn't stop at anything. And one of my favorite lines from this is, and this is actually what Dahlia Gillespie, which is Alessa Gillespie's mother, who is the reason that all this happened, essentially. She's an example of a not so great mother. But one of the things that she says is a mother is God in the eyes of a child. And it's such a, like, ooh, it's such a profound thing to say. And then of course, Rose ends up saying it later when Dahlia this movie came out in 2006. So, okay, fine. It's a spoiler, but if you're a horror fan, you should have seen this already. So Dahlia survives the massacre that happens inside the church when Alessa gets let in. And she says, basically, I don't know why she spared me. Like, why am I still alive? And Rose tells her, a mother is God in the eyes of a child. God, I love that movie. So good. I need to do a series on adaptations. Yeah. So Rose De Silva. My number 1 really is my number 1 because the film she's in is so influential and important to me. Otherwise, she'd probably be my number 2 and Rose would actually be my number 1. But there's no denying the impact this movie has had on me as a whole. And so my number 1 is Diane Freeling from Poltergeist. If you're not familiar, Poltergeist is my first memory of life, my first horror movie. It's super influential, meaningful to me. But I was recently listening to the You Run podcast, and Scott and Mark were talking about Poltergeist. And one of the things that they continue to talk about that I think is such a valid thing to discuss when talking about the movie Poltergeist, because it is one of the things that makes this film so effective, is the family dynamic in this film. And the parents are great. They're funny, they're loving, they're invested in their children. Diane goes through a lot for her kids, but she's also, to me, one of the most relatable mothers in a horror situation. And I think that that's important because their family is very close and very loving. But I think like Scott talked about this. I'm pretty sure it was Scott that said this. It might have been Mark on the You Run episode. I'll link that in the description below. If you're not listening to them, you should be. They're phenomenal. We Hear Voices are big fans of the You Run podcast. And where he talked about the fact that he thought one of the best things was when things got really, really bad, they sent the kids away. And how many times in horror movies do they skip over that? And you end up with these kids in these awful situations. And I'm like, send them away. Send them away, you know? And I think that, but just in general, her character, the things that she goes through, the way she is through all of these situations, what she's willing to sacrifice. And you can say all day, oh yeah, like moms are supposed to do that, right? But how often do you see movies where that's not the case? There are far more examples of bad moms in horror than there are good ones, because we like to make movies about trauma, right? So anyway, so my number one is Diane Freeling from Poltergeist. Excellent example of how a mother should be in times of crisis and hauntings. So anyway, kind of a short one. I just wanted to do my top 5 horror moms because I've been thinking a lot about that, because I was just talking to someone the other day about Rose Da Silva. I may go watch that after this. I'm such a fan of that movie. I love the franchise, the game in general. But I really loved the first movie. Revelations would have been a lot better if they had not done it specifically for 3D. You can tell when they did everything that it was all around the concept of it being a 3D movie. And when they do that, a lot of that magic disappears when you don't watch it in 3D. So that was not good. But anyway, yes, those are my top 5 horror mamas. If you're not familiar with Lady Crisis, like I said, I'm going to link all of her stuff below. If you're a horror fan and you're a mom, grab one. I also have a sticker, but it's freaking giant. So I have no idea where I'm going to put it. It's gonna go somewhere magical, though. I just know it. I've got, some space. I'll figure it out. But anyway, that's all I had for this one. At the end of this month, I am opening a new monthly series that I am doing with Scott from the You Run podcast that I think you guys will be interested in. I think it's going to do really well, and you're going to really like it. So keep you posted on that and getting ready to announce it. So hope you guys have a good rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend, and I'll see you in the next one.